looking at on our screen is our standard well browser. This is where the majority of our demo will happen. What we have over here is our map to the left and our analytics to the right. We can toggle a well list, and we'll do that here later, and I'll show you what all you can do when that well list comes on. But just to give you a lay of the land here, we have these dockable panels, and to the left you have filters. And from here you can save filters, you can recall filters, and you can share filters. Sharing filters actually will generate a link that you can send out to anybody. And if they're a WellDatabase user, they'll be able to jump right in and see the search that you've created. But even if they're not a WellDatabase user, you'll be able to view an interactive map where you can zoom in, look at well names and APIs. You just won't get all the details and the analytics that come with a full WellDatabase subscription. Moving down, data sources will be in the public for this webinar, but if you create projects within WellDatabase, you can select the project and then use that as your data source, and all filters and analytics will be based off solely the wells involved in your project. It's a great way to isolate data sources so that you can dive in and only work within specific regions at a time. And just going through the filters down there, we have depths, APIs, names. All of these lookups, you'll notice that there's an aliased and a reported option. We grab the data as it's reported from each agency, but then through our system, we alias a lot of those values. That can be anything from fixing misspellings or inconsistencies in namings to collapsing like operators. So, but it's important to us that we allow you to search by the alias for convenience, but also to the reported operator should you need to get into what was actually reported. A great example is WPX gets loaded in an alias to one operator, but then if you look at what's reported, they'll have a mid-continent, they'll have a Permian, a Bakken, and whatever it may be. They have several different operators, and so we allow you to search by either one. It gives you more options as to breaking down the data. Coming down under the geographic, there's something to note that the area of interest filter by default is the map bounds. That means whatever we see on our map will affect our analytics and our well list. This is typical and it's very intuitive in the way it works, but should you come up with an edge case where a well can't be visualized, perhaps because it's a historical well that doesn't have location data, all you need to do is click on the pencil here, and then you will be able to choose none for your filter, and it'll remove that. Moving down, you can search by land grids. You can search by play basin extents, which is just the geographical extent of the play basin, not the actual what the production is coming from. If you want to look from the producing formation, you can go down to the production area and you can choose by primary formation, either alias or reported again. And then through production, you can search through cum numbers, first so many months of oil, gas, or water production, the last so many months of oil, gas, water production. You can search for production between any dates. So if you want to say, show me all wells that were producing between January and December 2014, you can do that. Or you can do by event dates as well, permit dates, spuds, completion, production dates. We do pull in the frac data, so there's the frac focus. You can search by profit masses, service companies, and then materials. And we have a few flags down at the bottom where you can just go ahead and click to highlight data. And there's the options where you can look for wells that have production, or maybe wells that only have logs, or maybe all the rigs, and that's how you can show the rigs in the United States. We do have the ability to customize filters, and I will show you how you do that on the well basis. So you can come in and assign your own filters to any well as you like, and then you can use those filters here. So I'm going to hide the filter panel to the right, and then we'll open up the map tools here, sorry, on the left, on the right here, and it will allow us to kind of look at what our options are from a map. And so we have the Google-based maps that you can choose from, the terrains, the satellites, the hybrid maps, but then we also have several overlays that you can drop in. So you can choose whether you want to put in a shapefile, a ZMap, a KML, any of those items are directly importable right here. But then we also have several built-in overlays that you can do. So if I click on the WDB overlay, and you'll see we have several options. So you can put anything from states and counties, section, township, range. You can come to the plays and look at the outlines from the EIA shapefiles. If you want to get to a specific formation, you can do that, and have the boundaries, elevations. If we come to miscellaneous, you'll get the faults, and you can do an all wells layer. This will give you a background layer for all the wells in the entire database. So if you want to reference kind of a larger scale look, you can do that. And then pipelines, you get every pipeline, even the Gulf of Mexico offshore pipelines are listed here. So I'm going to come in and just drop the counties on just as a quick example. You can see they drop right in the background. Moving down here, we have under the well layer setting, so you can choose well spots, and that will give you the green dot for oil or the red gear for gas. But then the colorized groups is what we default to now because it's a little more interactive and it can do a little bit more for you. And so by default, it's grouped by well type, but then you can choose anything from current operator, from fields, primary formations. We'll look at that here in a second as we dive in. And then you can shape by properties as well and size by production numbers. If you're looking for a production bubble map or heat map, you can do those as well. We'll show the well laterals by default, but we don't show well labels unless you specify. But if you choose well labels, then you can choose anything from the well name, Q numbers, dates, elevations, TDs, and all the kinds of things like that. So you can develop a nice looking map and actually print these maps up to 42 inches on your plotter. So I'll hide that away. We're back to the kind of base interface here, and you'll see the wells are all clustered at a state level. We do that because we have 5.3 million wells in our system here, and you can see the information on the right. But if you click on any one of them and then just zoom to, you'll see that the clusters will start breaking apart, and we'll get down to the county level. So now you see we have 39,353 wells in our view. I'm going to just pan down a little bit to the more of the heart of the Eagleford area here. We'll see our numbers update, 106,000 wells, and then I'm just going to click on LaSalle and we'll zoom in kind of just to the middle of that county. So now that we've broken down under 1,000 wells, we get a couple things happening. Number one, we get production data for all the wells in our system. You can see each one of them there. You can see the permits over time, and then we can do a histogram for several properties on these wells. So this is all at the individual well level. When we have less than 10,000 wells on our map, you'll get the well spots, and we show the trajectories on here as well. To show trajectories, you can actually define at what zoom level to show those, and so you can even show those at a higher level if you want to. Because we want to kind of show, maybe we want to get a little bit more into production and understand kind of a comparative analysis here. My first thing I'm going to do is drop a filter on to kind of get a normalized set. And to do that, I'm just going to put a first production date in of the 1st of 2014. I'll type that date and then hit search. And we get a pretty quick response back. We get all the wells. So these are all the wells that have come online since 2014 in the middle of LaSalle County. So again, I can look at the individual production numbers. It's a little bit easier to see now. And then if I see maybe an IP that's interesting to me, I can click on this and it'll open up the details for that well. And so here's a well detail, and we'll take this time to look at what our well details shows you. So the tabs across the top will vary from state to state, and that's based upon the data that's made available in that state. So we always want to show you the max amount of data we can without showing you a bunch of empty tabs for states that don't report a lot of data. But just moving through them pretty quickly, the header information with location, depth, dates, and that kind of things here. If I move over one of the production data, it's a good time to point out that we allocate our data. So everything in our system has to be at the well level and at the month level. So that means in Texas, where oil leases are reported at the production is reported at the lease level, we do an allocation for those. And we have a great blog, actually 3 blogs showing you exactly how we go about that process. And we're going to do a webinar as well, kind of running through both the pros and cons of allocating, the kind of pitfalls that you run into, and just kind of, we'd like to be open with the way that we do our allocation, but just know in our system that we do allocate the data to the well level, but then we'll show you both the lease level production and the allocated. So you'll see here you have oil, gas, and water, as well as allocated oil, gas, and water. When we're talking about water, one more thing, we do calculate the water in Texas since it's not reported with the production data. So we do some analysis along with our allocation that allows us to give an estimate for the water cut on a well. So all of that could be going into more detail at a later time, but if you have any questions, we'll post in here a couple links so that you can look at those blogs and see exactly how we do that. Kind of moving across, we have permits, completions, test data. One thing about our test data, especially in Texas, is that it has in the initial production test, there's a lot more information. And so we show you all of that. The oil gravities, choke sizes, flow pressures, casing pressures. Sometimes if there's a pump involved. They'll have a pump size. And so it's a lot more detail if you want to understand what the IPs look like and kind of what the initial setup of a well is. It's helpful when you're comparing wells and their high IPs versus low IPs. You may find that pumps are involved in perhaps maybe driving some of those numbers. Again, we pull in the frac focus data, so you have the frac information. We break out water volumes, proppant masses, fluid types, the primary proppant materials. We identify crosslinks or clay control agents or breakers as well. And then the individual ingredients can be shown, and you can look at those too. And then again, there's some well construction information. The formations are pulled in here. And then at the very right-hand side, I'll jump over to that, and we'll look at the files. We do grab every file that's available, and so that can be anything from plats, permits, completion documents, log data, anything that's in the public space we get and we load in here for you to see. You are able to download any of these, but you can also open them directly into our little viewer. And our viewer will allow you to obviously see the document without having to download each and every one of them. So I'm going to close out our well detail page here and get back to our kind of a higher level look at things. So what we did so far, we zoomed into the middle of LaSalle County. We applied a first production date of 2014. And so now we're looking at basically wells that have come online in the last 5 years. So now to understand maybe who's bringing wells online, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to open up the tools, and instead of coloring by well type, I'm going to choose to color by the current operator. So what we'll see, we get some color changes, and we can pop open a legend if we want, and it'll tell you which operator belongs to which color. But we can also come across and start looking at analytics now. So on the analytics side, as you move across, you see our overview gives us aggregation, looking at the individual wells. Then we can start breaking down the data by state, county, field, lease, profile, and by operator is what we'll choose for this point. And so we immediately get the feedback, which operators we're looking at. So we have EP Energy has 100 wells here. We have BHP has 5, Silver Bow has 5, Payrock 1. So we're zoomed in pretty tight. So I'm going to back out just one level, and we'll get new numbers with the new operators in here. And we will see that EP now has 308. We have Carrizo in here in the northern part, Chesapeake kind of spread out. And so at this point in time, I have a little bit better of a cross section of the top operators in the last 5 years. I'm going to scroll down and kind of do some comparative analysis. So we have the by well count, and we also have by cum numbers. If I scroll down, you can do this chart a number of ways. We're looking at a type curve now for each of these operators. You can turn it monthly. We can turn this into a cum chart. We can take this and stack these. We can create a percent so we can understand perhaps maybe a look at the kind of how each operator is breaking down in comparison to each other that way. I'm going to flip it back to a line and to the monthly type curve because I'm going to come down and we're going to do a really tight comparison on these top operators here. But before we do that, you can see we can look at some time series information kind of as the permits were coming online. We can flip that over and see when these wells were completed. So here's the time of kind of the breakdown of wells completed in this area, when the wells came online, when they started producing. Those all can be broken down in this time series chart that you have here. And then down below, you can do a little histogram that allows you to look at data groupings in different ways. And so we're looking at cumulative oil. I can look at IP histogram, and it's going to come back and show me kind of how the wells sit in the IP range point of view. And then down below that, we have the table, and this is a listing of every operator with the counts and cum numbers right there. And I can export this data, and that's one of the things we get that people want to do. You just want to identify the top operators in the area, export out that data, and move on. It's great for service companies trying to target which operators are most active, or maybe ones that fit a criteria, which is something we've added recently that you can actually filter down in this screen. I want to see maybe only well counts where we have, greater than 50 wells. And when I apply that filter, it actually only applies to this table down here. It actually doesn't apply to my map or anything like that. So it's a great way to isolate and filter on a subset rather than on the entire section of data. One other thing I'll point out about the histogram, should you come on and decide you want to look at, which of these wells, say, of these what do we have, an IP between 2,000 and 2,500. EOG has 11 of those wells. If you click on this, then over here on the map, it'll highlight those wells that were that fit that criteria. So you can see them. They're kind of muddy in there right now, but regardless, you can identify the ones that fit the criteria in that histogram. So I did my filter on this to see only ones that had more than 50 wells in my search. So now I'm going to, since I like what my list is, I'm going to choose these, and then I'm going to choose to map these. And so what that does now, instead of just filtering my table, it's going to come over and it's going to drop those filters into my filter set here. So if I scroll up top, then I will see those 4 operators are now listed as filters to my map in my operator section. And so now everything will be limited to just those operators. We get a little bit more of a tighter comparison. You can see EOG, higher IPs, maybe a lower decline. EP is a little bit flatter on both sides. And then you have Chesapeake actually below that as well. Get in tight like that, and sometimes it's hard to see. You can click and zoom in and see where each one is in relationship a little bit easier. We'll reset this zoom, and since now we've got this a little isolated to the top 4 based off of the central LaSalle County, I can actually back out a little bit more now and kind of look at a larger scale how these 4 operators compared to each other. And everything's dynamic, so all my zooming, my panning, everything I do will give me new charts, new looks at everything. And so now I can see that once I zoomed out, Chesapeake became my primary operator with 875 wells, very similar production profile it looks like. EOG, again, same kind of deal, EP and Carrizo, et cetera. So when you're comparing operators in an area, whether it's a tight area where you really want to understand the exact nuances of how each operator is producing, or if you want to break yourself out into a wide area like this, we could even go all the way out to the Eagle Ford, the entire Eagle Ford for these 4 operators, and we'll be able to compare as a whole how they're working against each other. That will give us, you can do it kind of any which way you want to break it down. And so we're working by operator. You can do the same thing by leases, wellbore profiles, by well types. You notice as we moved out, some wells outside the Eagle Ford got added in. I can come over to by primary formation. And this will give us a breakdown of how the formations in my search work. So I have Eagle Ford, some unknown, some Austin chalks. And so say I only want Eagle Ford, this is another great place where I can just come down, check the Eagle Ford only, hit map, and again, if you come to the filters, you'll see Eagle Ford is added as a formation, and it's now filtered out to just Eagle Ford wells. So here in a second, these guys will drop off, and you'll see a new chart that will just be the 3,099 wells in the Eagle Ford. So it's a great way of isolating and exploring, and that's really kind of the heart of what we like to do with our system, is that it allows you to dive in and kind of let new questions present new answers and explore the data rather than have a more rigid look at this is permit look, this is the completion look, this is production look. Everything is very kind of organic and allows you to flow through the system. So from an analytics standpoint, like I said, you can break these down any number of ways, but there are 3 different tabs across the top that provide a kind of a different look at the data. So the first one is the custom chart. The custom chart allows us to choose an X and Y axis and do a comparison to see kind of a breakdown, whether we're looking at line charts and activity over time, or whether we want to see kind of a comparison of production to parameters. We can do that. So a common one we want to see is lateral length we'll do lateral length by first, 6 months production, let's say. So first 6 month BOE. And it'll give us a quick scatter plot of how lateral length is related to the first 6 months BOE. Again, for all the wells in my search, it's not going to, it's dynamic again. As I kind of zoom in and out and move around, it'll give me a new look. And so what you'll see at a higher level, it's a pretty non-correlated item between lateral length and 6 months BOE. But if we take a minute and zoom in one more time to a little bit of a tighter area, what you'll notice is this should, when we get an update here, it will it'll tighten up a little bit. You'll see a little bit more of a straight line on the correlation between lateral length and 6 month BOE. And you can do this by any number of properties. So with lateral length, we can do it by proppant mass, we can do it by just about anything. And so it's a great way to, again, explore and see how items are working in relation to each other. And, and always remember that, should you have some of these, well, these have zero profit reported, what we can do is come down and say, well, only show me where we have, 4 million pounds of profit or more. That might give us a little bit better look. So there you go. So now we have a nice look. We've removed the wells that have lower numbers profit. So we're getting a nice, more correlatable index of how profit is affecting the first 6 months BOE. So this is really wide open. You can select chart types from scatter plots, pie charts, columns, bar charts, all those things. And then, of course, you can pick your properties, and then you can do multiple groups. So if you want to look at 6-month BOE, you can actually choose API as well. And when you do that, it'll allow you to identify which API numbers are corresponding to which spots on the chart. And it's a great way to further dig into the data. So now you can see this is the API number along with the values both for the lateral length and the first 6-month BOE. The last two charts are production-related charts, and the first one is going to be the monthly production for all the wells in my view. And so it'll be a month-over-month total number for each of the wells that we're looking at, as well as the well count involved. Since we picked January of 14 as our first production date, you'll see our date starts here. But then as you go up, you can see the total amount of production as well as come online. And then you can also get a chart table of this. Again, you can export this. And then one interesting thing you can do in here is that if you see a number that is interesting to you, say this 366,000 barrels of oil in April of 15, you can expand that and it'll go out and it'll grab all the wells that are involved in that calculation and bring them back for you, sorted by the oil amount. So you'll see that at the Alito B 32B unit 321H well, did 42,000 barrels and accounted for 11% of the production, again, in my area, my current search. So you can do this at any level. Again, you can do this with 100,000 wells, or you can do it with, this little section of 100 and something wells we have in here. The other option on the far right is our type curve. And a type curve, again, will use all the wells in your view, but it will set them out to month one, normalize everything to month 0, and you'll be able to see kind of the production curve for each of the wells. Again, you can export this, and then you can also expand and see how each well contributes to that type curve. But we can also do something that's really neat here. We can create a very quick back-of-the-envelope economics. So what I can do is I'm going to create a decline curve, and so I want to pick an area of my production where things are kind of leveled off, but not when the well count gets low, you'll get some jaggedness in your production numbers. So we'll just say 40 months, looks like it corresponds with 40 wells as well. So we get a nice clean curve, and then I will click the economics chart, and this will bring up a 20-year EUR look at this well, not at this well, sorry, of the type curve. So for the average well, in my view, does 227,000 barrels of oil, 293,000 MCF gas. This is with the current oil and gas prices as of today, and a 50-cent water takeaway. Is about a $13 million well. If you want to edit any of those values, you can just come to the oil side, pick a selling price, a tax rate, and you can actually get a little more involved per stream if you want. You can also come to a totals where we can find, again, very rough, but a working interest number, initial capital expense, and LOE cost. And then you can identify a full economic picture, again, back of the envelope, but quick and easy understanding of the economics of an area. We get a lot of people using this as a kind of first line of defense when they're evaluating a prospect or understanding an area. You can come in and say, does this meet a criteria that makes me want to dive in more? So it's, again, very quick and easy, one button kind of thing. If you want to become a little more detailed, especially on the stream level, you can do that. You can say, show me oil, and then I want to generate a decline, and then I want to set all my settings. What you see here is actually the exact same settings we used on the economics, best fit, max B value of 3 for 20 years. But if you want to specify exponential or harmonic or hyperbolic, you can. I'm going to leave it as best fit while we do this. If you want to set start and end rates, start and end months and initial rates, you can do that and say you want to forecast it out instead of 20 years, you want to do 30 years. You can do that. Or you can go to a monthly production limit. So show me production until we hit 100 barrels a month and then cut it off. So once I generate that, you will see the oil hyperbolic. You see the monthly on each one. And if you want to get that economic picture, you can just by clicking the dollar sign. And since we did 30 years, we bumped up 20,000 barrels or so. And yeah, the other thing to show you on here is that you have EURs, but you also show what's been recovered. And again, this is for the average well, in my view. It has produced for 55 months and recovered 166,000 barrels. It's very important and very nice to see that, because now you can understand what percentage of your total EUR has already been recovered at this point in time, and give you a picture of kind of the production profiles and the how that breaks down over time. Now, we've been in this screen. We never left the screen. Everything has worked with our map, our analytics. It's been in one place, so it's really nice. You can, again, explore, dig in multiple ways, and get many answers that way. But inevitably, people want to take the data out of our system, load it into other systems that they may be using. So in WellDatabase, we have a number of export options. And so to do so, I'm going to pop open the list, and we'll get a few new options here on our list. What you'll see across the top, we'll be able to add wells to a project. So we can create projects within WellDatabase and add wells. We'll be able to specify certain wells that we want to analyze separately from the rest. We'll be able to generate reports, but when we can also export data here. So when I click export data, it should pop up here with our export system. By the way, I am looking at production summary numbers here. I forgot I had already flipped this. You can decide in that list what you want to look at. But this is our data export system. You can come in here, and I'm just going to create a new profile and show you how it's done. The formats that you can produce out of our export system are CSVs, shapefiles, Excel documents, PhDWin, Aries, Petra, 298C, and Value Navigator. And we are currently rolling in geographics, WB4, and OpenWorks OWX files. So those will be coming out in our next release. I'm going to step through the CSV just to show you how you can customize your export. So as I move next, you'll be able to see what do I want to export. I may just want headers, and I may want completion data, but if you want, you can get anything from frac information, the well history, injection data, production data, test data. Any of those items are exportable. I'm just going to click next here, and it's going to say, what do I want from the well headers? I can pick and choose my specific columns. And again, I'm creating a template here so I can reuse this later. But, you know, if I'm just doing a one-off, or if I'm just being maybe a little bit lazy, I can just click add all and hit next. And then it's going to say from completions, what do we want? And add all and next. I'm going to give it a name. And then here's where I can check to create a template so I can use it again later. So I'm going to click finish. This will send off to a system in our back end, and it will allow it to get into a queue. And that way we can keep using WellDatabase and do some other items without waiting for that project to be finished. Without waiting for that export. When it's done, you'll see in a pop-up that tells you it's time to download the export, but then they'll also always be available under My Files to download in the future if you need to. While we're on the well list, I'm going to take a second to show you about projects in WellDatabase. So projects are a pretty flexible and open way of organizing and working with data. And so creating one is as simple as selecting the wells that you want as say the target wells in your project. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the top 5 or 6 here. I'm going to add wells to project. And then first thing it's going to do is going to ask me what are these wells, what do these mean? So these are our initial wells. I'm going to click next. And then I can add them to an existing project if I want, or create a new project. So I'm going to create a webinar project and test description, and then hit save. So this will be the first time that it'll take us away from that page. So again, it's nice to note that you didn't have to jump between different types of searches. You were able to kind of bring everything into one place. But now that we're in a project, it's kind of its own world that we can work within. It's a great way of getting simple organization working with data. So you'll see first is an activity stream. And so as wells are added, as searches are created, as files are added, all those will be listed here. There is a simple discussion board where you can leave notes, answer questions, and discuss topics that are, pertinent to the project. You can also view all the wells that you dropped in on your project. So we only have those 6 wells at this point in time. So those wells are the only ones that show in our well list here. You can create searches and you can upload files to your, and so when you create searches, you can create a typical kind of setup would be someone dropping in the wells for a prospect, and then maybe creating searches for offset wells, offset operators, other wells in the formation, those kind of things. And these searches will run every night and give you the updated amount. So if you're kind of monitoring a project and the activity in the area, you can create a wider scope search, and it'll notify you when new permits come online, when new production is reported, those kind of things. If I come down to the files section, there's an entire file system that allow you to upload files, create folders, that kind of thing. And so you can assign files not only to the project level, but then you can also assign them to each individual well level. And that way, if you have logs, you can drop them to the well. Production reports or drilling reports can be dropped on the well. But then the project level, you can create files, and whether it's lease documents or maps, those things will all you can organize in the project. So it's a quick and easy way to organize your files. And then the production tab, you will get the same kind of monthly and type curve production list that you get, the same ones we looked at on the analytics page, only it'll be isolated for just the wells within our project. And so you can do those same things as well with the creating type curve and decline analysis and economics, and all those things can be done right here as well. So that's a quick look at the project. Last, admin, you can add users. You can create and add any level of users from the administrators, editors, read-only. And so one thing to note about a project, and we have a lot of people starting to use our projects as virtual data rooms, because you can upload items to our project, and then whenever you share a project, add a new user, we'll invite them to come look into the project. And if they have a WellDatabase account, they'll get all the analytics, all the details and everything. But even if they don't have a WellDatabase account, they'll get kind of a read-only view of it. So they'll get to see everything from the production data, the wells, the search results, the files, and interact with all of that. They just won't get all, when they dig in, they won't get all the analytics, they won't get all the exports. So it's become a great way, alternative for customers to do a virtual data room that way, because you can still share the data as well as layer in all the public data that you're inevitably the potential buyers want to see. So that's everything from the project perspective. They're pretty wide open with people using everything from VDRs to creating field studies and using that to kind of break in and to help better organize the data. And again, whenever you're in the wells section, when you go browse wells, you can identify the project that you want to work within, and then isolate yourself just to those wells. So now that we've kind of tapped on just about every topic, and we're 33 minutes into this now, what I want to do is I'm going to bring up a new browser, a different browser that has a few items that we kind of already created, a few searches, just to kind of give you an idea of, we did that one diving in straight to the Eagleford, and that's mildly interesting depending on who you are. But some of the other ways that we could do, I have a few kind of preset ones we can look at. So this was the overview. If I come across what this is, we can look at our filters. We have wells from the Bone Springs, Sprayberry, and Wolf Camp that have come online between 2014 and 2016 with at least 2.5 million pounds of proppant. So that view is great. Now we can see, as how many wells we're talking about in the Permian, where they are in relationship to each other, and what their production curves look like next to each other. We can also see breaking down as far as which months the activity has been happening. And again, you can do that by permit, spud, or completion. You can look at the comparison on the histograms. And one thing to note, we talked about exporting data from tables and from the database, but we also can export every one of these charts. Every chart you see, you can take it to PNG, or you can download the data that's behind it. So something like CSV will give you the aggregated data, how many wells per formation were permitted in each month. So it's a great way to pull down data if you need to do some additional analysis yourself. The next tab, we have a look at that same view, kind of driven into the middle of the Midland Basin here. You can see we're still looking at Wolfcamp and Sprayberry exclusive here, but then we'll see the average proppant map by first 3-month oil. So you can see a quick look at how proppant is affecting these wells that were come online. Again, it's all the ones between 2014 and 2016. The next view we have here, this is Weld County, Colorado, comparison of the Codell and Niobrara formation completions we can see. So again, type curves, you can see the activity over time, all those items. what do we have? We have, this is the last 10 years of Bakken information, or aggregated by field level. So now we can see a nice stacked chart of each field with the total production numbers. So you're getting a view of the total production of the Bakken for the past 10 years, but then stacked by each field, so you can isolate and kind of compare and see where each field lays within each other. And again, this is a great starting point to dive deeper into the data, but there's a lot of information here you can see. So again, another great way of breaking it down. When we started, we went from browse to wells, and that's where we lived, but we notice there's a few other options here. You can choose to go by a state, a field, a lease operator, any of those items. And just to show you what that looks like, we did by the Sprayberry. And so what this does is isolate just wells from the Sprayberry here and allows you to look directly at those. It also allows you to run some reports about completions and permits on those, do those same analytic charts, but broken down just as a formation. So we do get a lot of customers who are only interested in a particular basin or state, and sometimes you want to come from that direction where you isolate that first, and then you can dive in and analyze from there. From our dashboard, this is our main dashboard here. You do have an activity, and you do have searches that are quick searches already saved for you. But then we also have some quick reports down at the bottom. This is where our pretty rig report and permit summary report are that allow you to kind of look at how these the activity. And so just to kind of look at some of those, this is our rig report. So the current rig counts, the average over the last 12 months by counties, by basins, by drill types, and production type. You also have them broken down. When we get rig data from Baker, we correlate it back to the permit data that we have. So we not only have the rigs information, but we've also correlated it back to the permit in which it was filed on. And so we can isolate out which operators are actually drilling, and then again, where they're drilling, what types and which basins. Those kind of things are all there. Moving over, here's a permit summary report, same kind of information. It's based solely on permits, so a little bit of activity over time, what states they're in, and which operators are the top 10 there. So quick and easy look at that summary. If you need the detail, you can get that as well. So this is the U.S. Permit Detail Report, where you can go in and you can see individual wells, APIs, locations, what counties they belong to, and that kind of thing. The other thing, we were looking at a formation there. So now I did it by state. So this is Texas total production. And you get a lot more of the same options here, but now we're isolated to Texas. So that Texas rig report looks like this. Gives you just the Texas data, letting you know which counties are active and what specific to Texas the activity looks like. Some of the same things, counties, basins, that kind of thing. But then we can also do that same permit isolated just to Texas as well. Give you which operators are working, and again, the detail. So this is isolated to Texas. So if you're coming from that direction and you know that you really only want to work in one area, it's a great way to do that so that you can get a little bit more clean and isolated reports and not muddied up with all the rest of the data for the country. So that's kind of wraps up our general overview here. We're right at